to find candidates and their contact details so you can build your pipelines. And my hope is at the end of this presentation that you feel motivated to download these tools and put them into practice in your day-to-day activities. I'm also going to show you how to effectively plan and schedule your time and manage your pipeline. And then once the presentation's over, I'm going to challenge you to go the extra mile and kind of explain what that means to me in being a great recruiter. So here's the 4 points I want you to get from this presentation as far as how to find people. There's going to be some cool tools, some of which you might have already seen on how to find candidates, contact details, and I'm going to share to you how to effectively plan and schedule your time. So here's a little bit about me. That's my bride and joy there on the bottom left, my wife Michelle, and my daughter Kylie. Interesting fact about me is I'm a twin. I do have something in common with Michael Jordan. I don't know if many of you know, but Michael Jordan was actually cut from his high school basketball team when he was a sophomore. So was I. Michael Jordan went on to become a great basketball player, and I got involved with the math and chess club. I eventually went on to college and went to Western Washington University up at Bellingham, Washington, where I got a degree in mathematics. And I spent the last 18 years recruiting and sourcing. I've been both an agency and corporate recruiter. I initially started off doing IT software development and moved into ERP, mainly SAP and Oracle. Last 10 years I've been working with an engineering construction firm, and now I am presently a sourcing manager for PwC, a public accounting firm. So here's a quick joke. It's I heard when you do a presentation you want to start off with a joke, and since Halloween's around the corner, I wanted to share with you a quick joke, and that is, what is a ghost's favorite data type? The answer is Boolean. Now, for the sake of this presentation, and for those of you that don't know what Boolean is or how to use it when finding people, then I'm glad you're on this call because you're going to learn some good stuff today. But for those of you who already are familiar with Boolean, this is not a presentation about Boolean. I'm not really going to go into it much, but I'm glad you're here as well because this webinar is more about managing your pipeline. But for those of you unfamiliar with Boolean or just kind of new to the industry, typically Boolean is the language that we use when searching the internet. Mainly it tells you two things, really, where to look and what to look for, and there's going to be some examples of that throughout this presentation. All right, so what I want to do now is play a real quick game, and that is there's going to be a test afterwards as well, so pay attention, but I'm going to share with you a slide in a minute, and I want you to memorize the slide and then think about what the words on the slide mean. I'm going to give you a minute to look at that. Now what I want you to do is read each word one time and count how many F's there are on the slide. Now we're going to do a quick survey and see how many F's did you find. Some people found 2, some found 3, some found 4, all the way up to 8. I won't have you raise your hands, but what I will do is go back to the slide and we can actually count them together, and you can see there are 7 actual F's in this slide. So if you saw all 7, congratulations. Most people typically saw 3. If you saw more than 3, then you are special. Some people actually saw 8, and that means they're seeing things on here that aren't necessarily there. But the point of this slide is that there's candidates that are right in front of us every day, and sometimes we just look over them and don't see them. So I wanted to, I guess, share that with you so you can keep an open mind to some of the things you're going to learn today. All right, first we're going to talk about how to find people, and there's really a basic definition for the sense of this webinar. We're going to talk about pipelining. There's really 2 types of pipelining or types of requisitions that we work with. Mainly that is that when we creating, there's ongoing and one-off sort of requisitions, and in ongoing requisitions, that is where you're creating a constant and consistent flow of candidates. There's the one-off requisition, and those are where you're creating a slate of candidates for a single position. either way, identifying the openings are constant, identifying the companies that have the skills that you're looking for, and then building a sourcing target list for those positions. All right, the targets for building your pipeline are really three. There's active candidates, and those are people who are actively applying to a website if you have an applicant tracking system, or maybe they're going to a job board and posting their resumes on there. They might be referrals or people you meet at job fairs or just networking in general. Then there's passive candidates, and those are people who are maybe open to opportunities but not actively looking. Some examples of that are maybe people who posted a job for us maybe in the last 12 months, or maybe their LinkedIn profile says that they're open to job opportunities. And then there's potential candidates, and that's pretty much everyone else who doesn't really fit in either of those categories. Even if they're not looking, they're hard to find, they're a potential candidate. The question is, though, can you find them, can you afford them, and then can you convince them to come to work for you? Okay, so where do we find people to build a pipeline? I realize most of you guys are hiring for the technical field, but when I started recruiting back in 1997, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, those weren't even companies yet. And really the only job boards around were Career Builder and Dice, and they were only a year old. I was 2 years into my recruiting career when Monster came around, and really the big game changer was Google. That started in 1999. I was 6 years into my career when LinkedIn opened up its doors. Facebook came around a year later, and then Twitter launched in 2006. Another really big game changer for sourcing and recruiting was when Apple launched the iPhone in 2007 and then the iPad in 2010. And then since then, other companies like Snapchat, Instagram, all those have been born. You get the picture. The main thing I'm trying to get a point across to you guys is that things change all the time, and you really have to be flexible to change and willing to always be learning. And I realize for most of you guys, recruiting technical people typically sit on GitHub and Stack Overflow. So where do you find people to build a pipeline? Now here's two Boolean strings that we're going to look at today for software developers. And I live in Texas and recruit mainly in the Dallas and Houston area, so that's where we're going to take a quick look at. And there's two examples. I'm not going to go into too much detail again, but these are Boolean searches that I put together for the presentation. Again, this is not a blog or not a webinar about Boolean, so I don't want to get too much into detail about that. But if you're interested or want to learn more about Boolean, at the bottom of the page, there's a guy named Dean DaCosta who wrote a great blog on plain text breakdown of Boolean, and it's really the best plain English version of Boolean that I've ever seen. I did get a question asking if I'll be sharing the deck, and yes, I can share my deck with you. It's also being recorded as well, so the folks over at Search Wizards will get it out to you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about a basic search for a Java developer in Dallas. And what I typically like to do is start off with a zip code radius finder. And the reason I do this, for example, if you're recruiting for Microsoft, Microsoft is on the east side of Seattle, so you might not find a lot of people maybe living in West Seattle that'll want to commute over to the east side and fight the I-90 or 520 traffic. So typically I start with a zip code radius finder. And in this particular case, I'm taking a 30-mile radius within an area of Dallas where most of the high-tech companies are. So if you go to a zip code radius finder, and it's real easy to go to zipcodes.com and look for 30-mile radius within Addison, Texas, it'll pull up all the different zip codes. Now the reason I show you that is at the beginning of my Boolean logic for when we're searching Google, and that's the search engine I'm going to use first, is I put those zip codes in with 2 dots in the middle, and then I put TX or Texas, and that's mainly just the number range in the state, so it hits on addresses. If you look at the bottom of the slide, you'll see if you just put in the zip code, for example, 75001 and hit search, you'll end up getting a bunch of false positives or results that you don't really want as far as resumes of people is what you're searching for. So you don't necessarily want Lego Star Wars Republic Troopers versus Sith Troopers or the Streamlight Stinger flashlight with character number 75001. So the breakdown of this particular Boolean logic is I like to put the zip code in with the state so it hits on actual addresses. Then we're going to look for in the title or in the URL the word resume and Java, people that have the word Java in their resume. And then we're going to exclude certain terms, and in Google you can use the minus sign, but we don't really want to pull up resumes that are sample resumes, or we don't want to pull up something on Google that is a Java job. We're actually looking for resumes of people who have Java in their title that are in a particular zip code. So if you put that Boolean logic into Google, you'll see here that it pulls up 172 results in about almost a second, 0.87 seconds. So you have 172 potential candidates now that you can reach out to that have the word resume in the URL or title and are within that particular zip code within the 30-mile range of the area that we're looking for. Okay, another Boolean string that I like to use, or especially if you search in technical talent, is a place called Github. And for those of you unfamiliar with Github, it's really a repository for web developers or coders to put their code and go into. So it's a great place to search for if you're looking for candidates. So this particular Boolean string, we're going to break it down. Again, the site GitHub is where we're going to search. And what we're looking for here is front end or JavaScript, that people that have those terms in their profile. And then again, some additional information, specifics as far as the search goes on where in GitHub we want to look for. But when you plug this particular Boolean string into Google, you'll see that it pulls up 120 results. And these 120 results all are people that are on GitHub who have the words JavaScript or front end in their profile. So now that we got sort of some names of people that we can reach out to, what I want to do is show some of the tools that I use as far as finding contact details. Now, a lot of you guys, if you haven't yet, I typically use Google Chrome as the web browser. There are certain Chrome extensions and plugins that you can download from the Google Chrome web store. I'm going to demonstrate some of those tools. I know many of you guys are probably using some of these as well, but for some of you who haven't seen these yet or seen them in use, I want to go ahead and just demonstrate some of the tools that I use to find phone numbers. And what a lot of these are social aggregators, and what I like about them too is what they do is they aggregate or they scour the internet and they look at all the different places someone has a social footprint, and they take all that information and those disparate pieces of information and they put them in one place. And what I like about that is, when I'm talking to a candidate on the phone, I can click on, and I'll show you here in a second, that you can look at their Facebook profile, their Google Plus profile, their GitHub profile, their Twitter profile, and you can take all of that information and have it in one place. So when you're talking to them, you can have an intelligent conversation and try to establish rapport when reaching out to them. So let me show you how some of these social aggregators work and the ones that I use. And the sourcing market is changing all the time. I just recently got back from SourceCon a couple weeks ago, and there's several additional social aggregators, a way to get phone numbers. This is just a sample or a couple that I like to use together. But let me go through some of these. So you can see how to find candidates, and this was the search that we just ran on GitHub, and you can see that these are the names. And the two underlying names I want you to look at are Ben Houston and Matt Keys. The first guy we're going to look at is Ben Houston. Now this is actually a false positive because I'm looking for Java developers in Houston, and this guy has a last name of Houston, but he lives in Ottawa, Canada. So he's not necessarily anybody that I'm going to reach out to right away. But you'll see here, once I turn on Connectifier, and again, it's a Chrome extension, it pulls up 3 email addresses for Ben that I could potentially reach out to him at. It also has his LinkedIn profile, Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus, Quora, a lot of other tidbits of information that with one click I can find out more about Ben before I reach out to him. Another guy here, Matt Keys, he was another guy that came up, and if we click on his link, it takes us and turn on Connectifier, it gives us a Gmail account that we can now reach out to Matt. So this is just an example of one of the tools that you can use. The next one is Profit. Here's another This is again Matt Keys, but this is his LinkedIn profile. And you can see here that Profit actually pulled up 3 email addresses for him. The one with a thumbs up, that email address has actually been verified already. So that's a good email address that you can reach out to and pitch Matt about a potential job that you have. Another one, this is a Connectifier. This is a good friend of mine, Aaron Daniels, who I think spoke to you guys a couple months ago. People have more of a social footprint. You can pick up a lot of information. What I wanted to show here is, Aaron actually has 4 phone numbers attached to his account. Now, some of these numbers aren't good anymore, but the point is that Connectifier was able to go out and aggregate this information. So now you have 4 potential phone numbers that you can reach out to Aaron if you want to try to reach him on the phone as well as email him. The other one I like to use is Connect 6, and not a lot of people use Connect 6, but you can see here it takes all their information and puts it in one place. It did give us an email address on Aaron when he was at Insperity, but what I like about Connect 6 is when I'm searching through people's connections, when you use Connect 6, you can just toggle the mouse over a person's profile, and it'll pull up the information versus clicking on it all the time. So I use Connect 6 quite regularly, and you can see that all these tools, they end up parsing and going out and browsing the internet and gathering different information. So, there's not necessarily one tool that's better than another. I typically like to use all 3 of them simultaneously because some pull up different information or pull information from different spots. This other one, this is 360 Social. You can't actually download this from the Chrome store anymore. I got in on a beta version, so I don't want to get into too much detail on that one. Again, here's Profit with Aaron, some additional information. Profit actually found 3 email addresses for Aaron. The other thing I like to use Connectifier for is, I don't know if you have gone through and seen when you're searching LinkedIn, for example, and you see somebody's first name and last initial, or you see LinkedIn member. So what Connectifier actually does is, if you click on the profile and turn on Connectifier, it'll pull up that person's name, and you can get their last name and then search some more information on them, or use that to potentially find some more search information. So what I like about Connectifier is it helps reveal some of the hidden profiles of people that are trying to hide a little bit more. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about Facebook graph search, and for some of you who've been around for a while, Facebook graph search was a great search methodology that we used in sourcing, and it was a way that you could search Facebook. I'm going to show you kind of how that works, but really Balázs Parkasé, who's from Hungary, and he's the head of strategy and innovations for Randstad SourceRight, and he was presenting at SourceCon this year in Dallas a couple weeks ago, and he was presenting on the anatomy of a super sourcer, but he's really the one who sort of introduced the sourcing community to the Facebook graph search a couple years ago, and again allowed you to search Facebook using natural language versus Boolean. Now, since then, Facebook's made some changes, and so has the sourcing world, and along with Shane McCusker with Intelligent Software, they've created a tool that you can use to help you search and then scrape the information and user data into an easy-to-use spreadsheet. I'm going to show you how that works. So again, this is a free tool you can download from the Chrome Web Store. If you go to the Chrome Web Store and download the Facebook graph search extension, it's called Facebook User or FBUID, and there's actually several of them. So the one that you want to click on is the Facebook User ID by AutoClick. And again, that's free. They do have a paid version as well, but the free version, I'm going to show you how that works. So yeah, I work for an accounting firm called PwC. So what I did was I went in and I went into Facebook and I used my wife's account, who's not connected to anybody, and I said, show me people who like PwC, the company that I work for, who are from Texas, which is the area I recruit from, and that live in Dallas, which is the area that I'm searching for. And you can see here it pulled up 126 names of people who are on Facebook who like the company I work for, and they're from Texas and live in Dallas. Now, the one guy that we have circled there, Min Tran, Min works for my competitor Deloitte, so he's definitely somebody that I'd like to talk to. So what you can do with a Facebook graph search is then take that information and it'll let you scrape it, and you can download everybody's names, their Facebook user ID, and then their Facebook account. Or you'll notice that their email address is at facebook.com. So Mintran is somebody I want to reach out to, and I do some research. I can find an email, but if I want to ping him on Facebook potentially, then I can use this facebook.com email address. And if you send him an email, it'll actually go to his other folder in Facebook, which a lot of people check periodically. But it's another way to potentially reach out to candidates. Now, what Shane McCusker and the sourcing community did is they built a tool, and you can see that little guy at the top that I circled. That's what the Facebook UID tool looks like sitting on your Chrome browser. And what they did was they built a tool that allow you to search people's current job. And when it says current job, that's actually either by title or by company, where they live, and a few other things as far as where they've lived in the past, maybe what language they're speaking, or an education that they have, or sites that they've liked. So in this case, since I recruit accountants, I look typically for senior associates as a title who work for my competitor KPMG in New York, for example. When I pull it pulls up several people who work for my competitor that are all senior associates at KPMG who are on Facebook. And again, if you click on that Get User ID, that will download an Excel spreadsheet and put all their information for you in an Excel spreadsheet. So those are just a couple of tools that I use, when sourcing, to start building your pipeline. Now that you have a list of people that you found on the web, you have their emails and phone numbers for most of them. You can connect with them with LinkedIn emails if you have that ability to do that as well. But this is an example of my active pipeline that I use currently. And basically what I do is I have it broken down by the candidates that I've talked to, the different firms or my competitors, what their status is. Future associates, those are people that maybe are sort of new, maybe only have 1 year experience right now, so I can't necessarily use them, but I do want to start building up the communication with them. So maybe next year or the year after, they'd be somebody that we would reach out to. And again, the people that are blank, those are new people that I added to the list, within the last week that I have to reach out to. So that's kind of how I organize my desk and keep things straight in my sourcing efforts. All right, now these are some sales statistics that I want to talk about. And if you're in sourcing or recruiting and you have to call people and reach out to them, then you're pretty much doing sales. And basically some interesting statistics came out, and that is that 48% of salespeople never follow up with a prospect, and 25% of salespeople make second contacts and then stop. 10% of people make more than 3 contacts. And you'll notice at the very bottom, 80% of the sales are actually made on the 5th to 12th contact. So very rarely do you call somebody up and catch them on that first contact and are able to discuss their career plans with them and get them. But you've already spent a lot of time searching and getting them into your pipeline. So you want to get a yes or no from them before you start looking for other people. So that's why it's important to reach out to them multiple times. So this is sort of I showed you some tools that you can use to help you find information, but ultimately you have to reach out to these candidates, and tools don't recruit people, people do. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is, I try to break down how I run my desk when engaging candidates, and once you find the information, sort of the approach that I take. And usually, if you're maintaining a pipeline, you're really trying to reach out to these candidates several different times throughout the year. And usually what I do is send out an email or in-mail, sort of that first touch, and I usually give them a couple of days to get back to me. At the same time, I also have sort of a social touch. If they have a social presence, I will try to like something that they have on Facebook, or follow them on Twitter, or see what they're doing on Google Plus, but somehow connect with them or touch them, or let them know that I've looked at their information. If I have a phone number, then I will call them. If not, you can always get the number from the direct line. You know where they work, you know who they are, so you can reach out to them by phone. One trick that's actually worked really well for me as far as phoning people And if you're like me and you get an unrecognized number, for example, a lot of times you won't answer it and hope it goes to your voicemail. But what I'll do is I'll call somebody, and if they don't pick it up right away, I won't leave a voice message. I'll actually wait about 10 minutes and then call them back. And a lot of times what people do when they see you calling back and you didn't leave a voicemail, you've kind of got their curiosity as, I wonder who that was that called me. But the fact that you called them back lets them know, they're like, hey, let me pick this phone up and see who this is. And it often works pretty well to at least get them on the phone and get a dialogue started. But if for some reason I don't get them to pick up the phone, I still won't leave a voicemail that first time. What I'll do is I'll send that email message that I initially sent. I like to forward the original sort of unanswered email, and typically I'll send it with some additional text, something like, hey, in regard to the email below from last week, I'd really like to know if you have a few minutes to discuss your career plans and see if there's any opportunities here at XYZ that may be of interest to you. Do you have time for a quick phone call or email? Like I said, you've already spent all this time gathering the information to get their phone numbers and email contacts, so you really want to do everything you can to be politely persistent in getting them on the phone. If they still haven't responded, I'll call them again and leave a voicemail, and then I'll wait for them to get back to me and put them back into my pipeline and set them up for a tickle call, maybe in 30 to 60 days. So that's typically sort of how I run my desk once I use the tools to start engaging people. So sort of the pipelining flow chart is, once you find people, typically we'll use Boolean and all the tools that I showed you and additional tools to really find candidates and profiles that fit your search. The next thing you do is you connect with them using the phone or email, or some people use text, media, different social media. Then you engage them, have meaningful conversations with them about their career goals, and screen them for opportunities with your company. And then you convert these people to applicants by having them, the qualified ones who are interested and available, actually apply to a position that you have. So that's sort of the flow chart or pipelining that I use when running my desk. So we might as well admit it, but we all want people to like us. In fact, a psychologist named William James said that one of the deepest drives in human nature is to be appreciated. And this desire to be liked and held in high esteem, to be sought after and appreciated, is pretty fundamental in all of us. There was a poll recently done among high school students on the question of, what do you most desire? And the overwhelming majority of them voted that they wanted to be popular. And this is the same urge in older people as well. That's why you hear a lot of people talk about how many Facebook friends they have, or how many Twitter followers they have, or how many LinkedIn connections they have. We never really outgrow that urge to fit in and be popular and be well liked and appreciated. So that's why it pains me when I go to Google. And if you go to Google and you type in recruiters are, this is what Google auto-populates, that recruiters are idiots, evil, worthless, useless, dumb, scumbags, the worst scum. So, how did our profession and sort of our collective credibility erode to the point that people don't like us this much? Well, the truth be told, there's a lot of bad, sort of lazy, mediocre recruiters in our industry who aren't willing, and they're just too lazy to do things the right way and go the extra mile. So, I get dumb recruiter emails and in-mails all the time, and like I'm sure many of you do. And a lot of times as sourcers, we share these dumb emails with our fellow sourcers. I get emails that say, hey, I took time to review your profile on LinkedIn and I want to talk to you about a construction manager opportunity we have. Now, I'm really like, there's nothing in my profile that says construction manager, and if you really got to know me, you'd know that I can't even hang pictures straight on my wall at the house. So, there's a lot of lazy recruiters, I guess, who send out templated emails, and they don't take the time to really research a candidate and tailor the individual messages. I received an email the other day that started, hey, Jennifer, I'd like to talk to you about an opportunity, and my name is Jason. So, you get those emails and it's just frustrating. Now, there's a lot of good recruiters out there as well, and the kind who follow up with candidates even if they don't get the job, the kind who take the time to research and realize that this so-called talent that we're reaching out to are actually human beings, and they treat them as such. And there really isn't much difference between a good recruiter and a great recruiter. In all my 18 years of recruiting, there's really two things that have separated great recruiters from the good recruiters. First off, a great recruiter has a desire to constantly be learning. Like I mentioned, this industry is changing all the time. And like all of you today who are taking an hour out of your time to focus on your professional development, like I mentioned earlier, recruiting, it's changing all the time. So you have to have that desire to learn and get better at your trade, and it's important. Secondly, what I've learned is that great recruiters are willing to go the extra mile. So, the difference between a good recruiter and a great recruiter is kind of like the difference between being a 250 and 300 hitter in baseball. And in Major League Baseball, 300 has always been regarded as a special number. It's like a 20-point game in basketball or a 1,000-yard rushing season in football. It's really the benchmark for excellence in baseball. And out of the 15,000 players or so who've played the game over the years, only about 1% have retired from baseball with a batting average of over 300. And if you think about all the thousands of at-bats that a baseball player has over his professional career, being able to retire with a batting average over 300 is pretty exceptional. And that's usually why those guys are always in the Hall of Fame. Now, for professional baseball players, the batting average is about 250. That means for every 1,000 at-bats, he gets on base 250 times. And the elite batters, they get on base 300 times. If you break that down a little bit further, that means every 100 at-bats, the average professional hits the ball 25 times, and the exceptional batters hit the ball 30 times. The difference in 100 bats is really only 5%. 5 more times does an elite professional hit the ball more or get on base more than an average professional. If you break that down to its common denominator or lowest common denominator, for every 20 times a baseball player gets up at bats, the exceptional ones are only getting on base 1 time out of 20. So it's not that much of a difference, but it makes it a huge difference between being a Hall of Famer and also in your paycheck. So, what that means for us in recruiting is, what is that 5%? Here's some interesting sort of recruiting facts that I want to share with you. So, Thursday is typically the best day to prospect, followed by Wednesday, and Tuesday is the worst, according to Inside Sales in the Kellogg School of Business. The best time to cold call is between 4 and 5 p.m., and the second best time is between 8 and 10 in the morning. And then the worst times are right before lunch at 11 and around 2 o'clock. The best time to email prospects are at 8 o'clock, or Johnny Campbell, who was at SourceCon, mentioned before 8 o'clock or 3 o'clock. And in 2007, it took a little more than 3.68 cold call attempts to reach a prospect. Now it takes about 8 attempts. So that's a little bit of interesting recruiter stats. Now, the average recruiter only makes about 2 attempts to reach somebody. Okay, so what I want to do is talk a little bit about if Thursday is the best day to prospect, what day do you think I'm going to do my prospecting on? It's going to be Thursday. If Tuesday is the worst, I'm not going to prospect on Tuesdays. If the best time to cold call is between 4 and 5, and the second best time is between 8 and 10, then those are the times that I'm typically going to be doing my cold calling. And same with emailing. Now, there's several different programs you can use to get your emails to go out at a certain time. So you don't necessarily have to email everybody at 8 o'clock or before 8 o'clock. You can certainly schedule those in their software to do that. And if you're using Outlook, you can do it in Outlook as well. And then similarly, there's also times that are best sort of social times on either Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Google. So, the reason I'm showing you my schedule, for a typical week is this is, kind of how I plan my day and what I do, when planning my cold calling, my email campaigns. I try to screen candidates after hours, and then also there's a lot of administrative work that you have to do. If I'm going to cold call first thing in the morning, then before I leave my desk, I know what 40 calls I'm going to make first thing in the morning, so when I get to the office at 8, I can pick up the phone and start cold calling. Now, there's many days in my career where I've eagerly gone to work and had a cleared calendar and had every intention to spend the entire day sourcing, but by the time I answered my emails and I had 10 different hiring managers stop by my desk, and then I followed up with candidates that are in the pipeline and dealing with agency recruiters that were calling me, and at the end of the day, I had no more candidates in the pipeline than when I started. So, it's really hard to juggle the demands of internal and external recruiting as a corporate recruiter or agency recruiter and still have enough time to effectively source qualified, available, and interested candidates. So, planning your day and protecting that time and sticking to your schedule and committing to your schedule really makes things so much easier. Okay, so a couple of things about going the extra mile. I once heard that if you're unconditionally committed to a goal, then the attainment of that goal is assured. And what does unconditional mean to you? What unconditional means to me is no excuses, no rationalizations. It means mental discipline, and mental discipline is developed daily. It's not something you're born with. You have to work on it every single day. It means sacrifice. It means late nights, heartaches, headaches, brain damage, leg cramps, rookies, extreme fatigue. In the recruiting world, it means backouts, cold calls, paperwork, administration, gatekeepers, wrong phone numbers, emails bouncing. But, unconditional ultimately means no matter what. It just basically means unconditional. So whatever comes up, you commit to that. It doesn't get in your way, and you just do it. So I want to share with you a video of someone I believe demonstrates what unconditional means. And I don't know if a lot of you guys have heard of Dick Hoyt, but Dick Hoyt started out running marathons when he was 36 years old. And his son Rick had asked his dad when he was in college if he could run a 5-mile race together to benefit a lacrosse player that Rick was going to school with before he graduated from Boston University. And after they ran that race, they've competed now in over 1,100 different endurance events, to include 72 marathons, 255 triathlons that typically involve swimming, biking, and running. 6 of those were actually Ironman competitions that consist of a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and a 26.2-mile run with no breaks. In fact, it's why they consider one of the most difficult one-day events in the world. So I want to share with you a quick video, and give me a minute to pull that up. Are you able to see the video? If so, if you can do me a favor and type in the questions, yes or no. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Yeah, now the reason I showed you that video was really to show you kind of what the extra mile, what it takes to go the extra mile. So what I wanted to do, or hope you get from this presentation, is that you're able to find people to put in your pipeline. Hopefully you saw some tools that you can use and how to plan and schedule your day and what it means to go the extra mile. So what I want to do now, I guess, is open it up for questions because we have about 15 minutes and I wanted to get through all of the information. But if you have any questions that you want to ask, if you can, type those in. Any questions that you have. One of the questions I did get was, are we going to get a copy of this presentation? The answer is yes. Looks like some people maybe didn't see the video. I apologize for that. I can send the video as well to Cindy, and we can have you see that. One of the questions somebody's asking is do any of the tools cost money? There are tools that you can use that do have cost associated with them as far as in the Chrome store. All the tools that I showed you are free, or at least have a free trial period. When I got them all the tools that I'm using are free. But again, I got in on some of the trials, beta versions. One of the questions I'm getting is, how many phone calls a day do you make? It just depends on the day. If I have a day where I'm just cold calling, typically I will try to get through probably, I start every day with 40 calls that I'm going to get through that day. So I at least make 40 calls before I do any additional sourcing or email campaigns. All right. Well, I don't see any additional questions coming in, so I appreciate everybody for joining this webinar. I hope you learned some stuff today. If you have any additional questions, you can email Cindy, and she can get you my email address. If you want to reach out to me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn. I did actually get another question. The question is, I use Facebook graph search as well, but I don't. Oh, the question cut off. Let me see if I can pull up the question again. Thanks, Wendy. Wendy said, great insight on the tools and how to run your desk daily. Madhu mentioned that she uses Facebook graph search as well, but she doesn't see their professional experience. If you have any any questions on that, when you go into the graph search, under the first title where it says career, you can either put in their experience or their title or the place that they work. All the tools that I showed are free tools, and there's actually several more that I didn't get a chance to show you guys, but there's several free tools that you can use for sourcing that don't cost anything. All right, everybody. I appreciate you listening to the webinar. If you do want to reach out to me, reach out to Cindy. She's got my email address, or find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with any of you guys to answer any additional questions that you have. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you later. Have a good day. Bye-bye.